What's going to kill Bitcoin? My name's Mitch. Pablo's gone for a walk, I think. This is Mitch Tape. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. This is definitely not financial advice, but I'm a Bitcoiner. And as a Bitcoiner, it's tempting to just pump out videos on how amazing it is. But this can sometimes be a bit off-putting to new entrants. Most people are risk averse and more worried about losing their money than why Bitcoin is a force for good. So I put this together to give you some idea of the major risks and why I think the chance of any of them occurring is actually quite low. I hope it combats some of the worries you might have. One of the most obvious threats to Bitcoin is serious competition from another cryptocurrency. But I think this is unlikely for a number of reasons. Firstly, only a small number of cryptocurrencies are actually competing with Bitcoin. By that, I mean a fully decentralized, peer-to-peer payment system using a proof-of-work mechanism with a fixed supply. The majority of the top cryptos by market cap are smart contract networks running on proof-of-stake or stable coins which are pegged to the dollar. The nearest competitor is Dogecoin with a $26 billion market cap, followed by Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin at around $10 billion. Bitcoin currently has a $767 billion market cap, almost 30 times that of Doge. This brings me on to the next reason, network effects. Network effects are the phenomenon by which the value a user gets from a good or service depends on the number of users of the network. One television on its own is useless, but connect two together and the value increases for both parties. Connect a third and it increases again, and so on. So the more users, the more valuable a network becomes. In fact, Metcalfe's law states that the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of connected users of the system, and that once a critical mass is reached, the growth in value will be exponential. Bitcoin has by far the most users of any cryptocurrency network, with at least twice the number of Ethereum, despite being a very active smart contract platform, and more than 10 times that of Litecoin. But this is just the direct network effect. As Bitcoin users increase, indirect network effects start to come into play too. More users drives price higher, attracting attention and bringing in speculators. This increases liquidity, as well as incentivizing entrepreneurs to start more exchanges, manufacturers to build better hardware, developers to create better software. This makes life easier for miners, attracting more capital and better kit, increasing the hash power, making the network more secure. So secure that merchants start accepting Bitcoin because consumers are demanding it as a payment option, and otherwise they'll get left behind. In reality, all of these effects are going on at the same time, feeding off of one another and building a massive positive feedback loop. Bitcoin is listed on every single crypto exchange. It has more liquidity, more software, more hardware, more hash power, more security, more widely accepted, and it's attracting some of the brightest minds in the world to work on it. All of this contributes to its primary use as a store of value, to the point where we're now seeing publicly listed companies hold it on their balance sheet, and entire countries adopting it as legal tender. The third reason for Bitcoin's continued dominance is its antifragility. This is a concept publicized by Nassim Taleb, which suggests that things are either fragile and break easily, robust and difficult to break, or anti-fragile and actually grow stronger from any attempt to break them. One of the first issues that Bitcoin ever had was in 2010, when one person exploited a flaw in the code to create 92 billion Bitcoin, which is slightly more than the supposed 21 million supply. Because Bitcoin's supply is so easy to audit, it was noticed and patched within 5 hours, and the blockchain reset to a point before the exploit took place. Another event, the largest Bitcoin exchange, Mt. Gox, 2014, it was processing 70% of all Bitcoin transactions worldwide. It was hacked and 850,000 customer Bitcoins were lost or stolen. You can imagine what a massive event this was in the Bitcoin community, and price dropped over 50%. But these days, it's just a blip on a long-term Bitcoin chart. Bitcoin has also survived many hard forks, which are attempts to change the rules of the network. A hard fork splits the blockchain into two parts, forcing miners to choose which set of rules to follow. This has resulted in many separate versions of Bitcoin, like Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin Gold. Bitcoin Cash is the most popular by market cap, but it's still only 1% of Bitcoin's market cap. Bitcoin's ability to withstand these attacks and even evolve to become stronger, coupled with its decentralization and lack of a focal point of attack due to the anonymity of Satoshi, gives it an extremely valuable 10-year track record, which is evident in its current price and level of adoption. So Bitcoin's strength lies in its ability to do one thing very well. It's not competing with the vast majority of other cryptocurrencies, which have many different objectives. In my opinion, it's way past the critical mass required to push exponential growth via network effects. And even if a challenger does come along, it can copy the best bits, adapt to shrug off any attack, and be all the stronger for it. Another risk often recognized is what's known as a 51% attack. As we saw in my Bitcoin video, check it out if you haven't already, network security comes from how much energy is spent by miners, known as hash power. The more hash power they contribute, the more chance they have of solving the proof of work puzzle, thus being allowed to add the next block to the blockchain and receive a reward of freshly minted coins. If a single entity is able to control 51% of the total hash power securing the network, theoretically, they can take control of the network and start adding blocks for their own benefit, and at the cost of other users. We'll look at what they can do if successful in more detail in a minute, but for now, let's look at the likelihood of a 51% attack itself. The recurring worry here was that until recently, well over half of the mining power was concentrated in China. Obviously, having humanity's greatest tool for freedom mostly secured in one of the most totalitarian countries in the world wasn't ideal. However, in 2021, the Chinese government banned Bitcoin mining, causing a mass exodus of miners and making the network substantially more decentralized. It's this decentralization which is key. When Bitcoin was launched, only Satoshi was mining it and had complete control of the network. As other individuals joined, hash power not only increased, but was distributed, making it harder for one entity to control. These days, mining is massively competitive, with probably more than 1 million entities participating worldwide, making a 51% attack extremely difficult to achieve. But if you do manage to 51% attack Bitcoin, what can you achieve? Well, you can't spend other people's money, you can't change the consensus rules of the network, and you can't make invalid transactions become valid. The only thing an attacker can really do is spend their own Bitcoin twice, which is why a 51% attack is sometimes known as a double spend attack. But even this is limited in potential benefits. Almost anyone receiving a substantial amount of Bitcoin in payment will require several blocks to confirm the transaction before releasing their side of the trade. This means an attacker would have to reorganize several blocks to have any chance of success, requiring even more hash power and more amount of time and control. In reality, the incentive structure of Bitcoin mining means that anyone who can gather such a large amount of hash power is much better off just mining legitimate blocks, so we can rule out attacks which have the sole aim of stealing money. That just leaves attacks which have the aim of bringing down the network by undermining security. As we've seen, any attempt to force miners into a coordinated attack would now have to span continents, let alone countries, so we can rule that out. The only other method is for an entity, probably on the level of at least a nation state, to amass enough mining equipment in complete secrecy to attack the network. This would be extremely difficult to keep quiet, as it would involve the forced cooperation of entire publicly listed companies, like the chip manufacturers, and have thousands of potential whistleblowers. As soon as the Bitcoin community catches wind of this, it could put safeguards in place which will protect the network. So a 51% attack on Bitcoin is extremely unlikely because it would require massive amounts of hash power or unattainable secrecy, be extremely costly to set up and operate, offer very limited reward, and have a very high chance of failure. On top of that, plenty of other networks with nowhere near the popularity of Bitcoin have undergone 51% attacks and still bounced back. Another threat to Bitcoin is the rise of quantum computers, which are so powerful that they either have enough processing power to perform 51% attacks or hack the hashing algorithm which currently protects wallets. Whereas normal computers use binary physical bits of zeros and ones, quantum computers use quantum bits, or qubits, which can be in more than one physical state at a time. This is known as superposition. This makes quantum computers vastly more powerful than classical computers. Publicly, Google has probably made the most progress in this field and says it has a quantum computer which is 100 million times faster than any classical computer with 54 qubits. However, This is way off the approximately 1,500 qubits required to attack Bitcoin. And it's probably safe to say that even secretive intelligence agencies who are working on quantum computing aren't getting anywhere near this either. But let's say they do. Quantum computing on this level would be the holy grail to any entity, allowing them to break almost all encryption keys on the planet. But as soon as you use it once, the secret is out and everyone else can react to it. Bitcoin would be pretty far down the priority list when you could steal nuclear codes or crack military communication networks. By the time quantum computing reaches this point, the Bitcoin network will be able to build quantum resistance into itself by allowing active addresses to switch to a new signing algorithm. This means that the only addresses susceptible to quantum computing will be those where the original owners are either dead or have lost their keys. So on the bright side, at least we'll be able to find out if Satoshi is still around. The rise of quantum computers will be such a massive paradigm shift in the world of computing that the danger to Bitcoin is really very minimal. We've got much bigger things to worry about when this happens. Probably the biggest risk to Bitcoin is regulation or political pressure. The potential attacks here are broad, from banning Bitcoin completely to changing its tax status or just shutting down exchanges. But giving individuals a way to resist this kind of attack is precisely why Satoshi created Bitcoin in the first place. Its peer-to-peer decentralized nature means that banning it or shutting down exchanges has tended to just drive people to peer-to-peer or offshore exchanges via VPNs. Equally, changing the tax status would probably cause a short-term hit to price, but that would just be another blip on a long-term price chart. It's not even guaranteed that tax revenues would go up, as the biggest whales can just buy residency in another country, and others would have much more incentive to dodge paying taxes completely. In fact, any attack from an individual country is almost certainly going to be a net negative for that country in the long run. Entrepreneurs, companies, and wealth will leave and be welcomed into Bitcoin-friendly countries, which will allow them to build without the uncertainty of wondering where the next political attack is going to come from. These days, pensions and insurance companies invest in Bitcoin, publicly listed companies hold it as a reserve asset on their balance sheets, even sitting politicians own it. Bitcoin is now at a point where governments can't treat it too harshly, or it will impoverish vast amounts of their voter base. And that's all they really care about. It would take a massive and concerted international effort to have any chance of having more than a short-term effect on Bitcoin. And in the current environment, that looks highly unlikely to me. One way of looking at it is that governments are increasingly so threatened by Bitcoin that they either want to stop it or control it. And that means that we're winning. But those are the biggest risks and why they're probably not as big a deal as people think they are. I'd add that it's pointless looking at risks alone. You have to look at reward too. And to me, Bitcoin's eventual price is binary. It's either going to zero or it's going to be something in the millions. That means that even if you assign a 50% chance of it going to zero, the risk reward at current $50,000 levels is massive. Personally, I put the chance of it going to zero somewhere around 10%. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.